So, dear learners, I welcome you all to this lecture today on liberty, the concept of liberty. In our previous class, we discussed about the development of the concept of liberty. We also discussed about the meaning of liberty. We discussed 5, 6 definitions offered by the expert or the scholars on liberty, and in the light of those definitions, we tried to understood the meaning of the concept of liberty. When we discuss the meaning of the concept of liberty now, on the basis of the definitions that we discussed in our previous class, it emerges that there are two aspects of liberty. In the light of definitions, the negative liberty, positive liberty, we were saying that, there were scholars who thought that the potentials or the abilities of the human beings can be fully developed only when positive socio-economic and other conditions are provided, and that is why then only liberty can be enjoyed, and they were ready to accept the restraint, and there were scholars who were thinking that the absence of restraint is freedom. So here, on the basis of those definitions, we find that there are two aspects of liberty. Number one, negative liberty. The negative liberty means absence of all restraints. Interference by the state or society or the social conformism is considered a hurdle in the way of the realization of liberty. So first of all, in the negative concept of liberty, what happens? That the scholars believe that there should be complete absence of all restraints. Interference by the state or society is considered as a hurdle. So when we say that absence of all restraints, why they advocate this kind of view about the liberty? Because they believe that human beings are rational creatures. And that is why even if there is no restrictions upon their actions and behavior, they are quite capable of governing themselves, quite capable of regulating their behavior in such a way that anarchy will not be created in the society. So that is why they advocated what is called absence of all restraints, limitations and all. They also want, in the negative concept of liberty, the supporters of negative concept of liberty think that undue interference by the state or even by the society is bad for liberty. So what we call social conformism. For example, certain societal values are quoted against, the pressure of morality or the moral values, ethical values or the social values. They become a kind of hurdle in the way of realization of liberty. So it is not only that a state is trying to restrict the freedom or liberty of the individual, but you will find that the society is also responsible. So that is why the social conformism on many occasions becomes social terrorism, where the people are not given any kind of a space. So the individuality cannot be maintained because you have to conform to the social norms and the custom, tradition, values that have been there in the society. Sir Ida Berlin says that some portion of human existence must remain independent of the sphere of social control. Again, remember. So, some portion of human existence must remain independent of the sphere of social control. Lines must be drawn for keeping authority at bay. Unquote. You see. So, the social control, first of all, we were talking about the social control over means of production when we were discussing the Marxian concept of rights or the Marxian theory of rights. Social control, it may be the control by the state or it may be controlled by the society. So that is why, when that kind of limitation is there, what happens that some portion of human existence must remain independent of the sphere of social control. according to Sir Isa Berlin. And line must be drawn for keeping authority at bay. So it means you have to, you know, have a line of demarcation between what is personal and what is impersonal. You have to have a line of demarcation where you can say that this is my privacy and it should not be invaded either by the authorities or by the, the social organizations. That is what being emphasized. You can also understand in the light of the famous statement of Rousseau when he says that man is born free but everywhere is in chains. Unquote. This is a famous statement by Rousseau that man is born free but everywhere is in chains. So these chains, when we are going to see, it is not only the regulation by the state, it is not only the restrictions imposed by the state, but what are these chains? These chains may be custom, tradition, moral and ethical values, milieu, etc. that we quote and we try to change the individuals. The exponent of this view of liberty means the negative concept of liberty are Hobbes, Locke, Burke, Adam Smith and J.S. Mill. These are the scholars. For example, you see that when Rousseau was developing his theory, or first of all, we should go to Hobbes. Hobbes, for example, is saying about the natural rights. He's talking about the natural rights. And the natural rights, right to govern themselves, that was there in the state of nature. Again, we find that the Rousseau, when he is going to discuss this state of nature, he is saying that John Locke we had already discussed in detail, but here again it is important to mention John Locke's state of nature. That in the state of nature, John Locke is also saying that the people had a natural right to liberty, right to, life and right to property. And that is why he says that any interference by the government which has been established by the contract, any interference by that government is an evil. It should not be there. On the other hand, we find that Rousseau has the idea of a paradise-like state of nature when the people were living in a perfect natural condition, bereft of all artificialities according to him. It was just like primitive society, where noble, savage, innocent human beings who were not knowing cunningness and all. So these kind of human beings were living, and that noble savage, when man was just like a noble savage, that was the paradise-like state of nature. But after that, you will find with the development, with the scarcity of resources, increase in population, then the development of the concept of mine and thine, family, private property, etc. Ultimately, what happened? That man becomes cunning. And that is why the paradise-like state of nature was lost. So paradise lost, it was just like that. So that is why we find, and he says that in this, when the culture, civilization, all that developed, that was chaining individual. It was imposing some kind of restrictions on the natural freedom that the man was enjoying. So that is why he said man is born free, but everywhere is in chains. So we have the exponents of this view of liberty are Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Burke, Adam Smith and J.S. Mill. After negative concept of liberty, we have positive liberty. And the positive liberty, we have certain reasonable restrictions are accepted. In the positive liberty, what happens? The certain reasonable restrictions are accepted. So the positive liberty also advocates for creating certain positive conditions of life to realize liberty. So it is not only that certain reasonable restrictions are accepted by the supporters of the positive liberty, but we also find that they say that this much is not enough, but it is the responsibility of the state to create, conducive conditions for the enjoyment of liberty. Rousseau, T.H. Green, Barker and Lasky are the supporters of this view of liberty. So we can understand, when we are trying to find the difference between the positive liberty and the negative liberty, we can have, for example, the liberty that is enjoyed in the jungle, where the animals are free to do whatever they want, and the might is right become the governing principle. Since animals are not considered as rational, so that is why it becomes jungle. Here, what happened? The supporters of the negative concept of liberty, they say that what differentiates us from the animal kingdom, that we are rational creatures. So that is why we can enjoy our freedom without hurting others, which is not possible in the animal kingdom. But that kind of freedom, they say, that should be given to the individuals. On the other hand, those who are the champion of the positive concept of liberty, they say that if there is no restraint on the enjoyment of liberty or the freedom, then what will happen? That the state, anarchy and the chaos will be there, as was depicted by Thomas Hobbes, that there was no common superior, so that is why there was no restrictions upon the enjoyment of the natural rights, and this was the reason that there was war of all against all. So that is why, when the open cutthroat competition is there in the society, what should happen? That some kind of regulation of behavior by the state or the common superior is needed. But it is not only restriction, it is also availability of the positive socio-economic and other conditions of life that are also important. So that is why it is called positive liberty. Here we are going to discuss J.S. Mill's views on liberty, because the J.S. Mill's magnum opus, that is on liberty, or the essays on liberty that he wrote, is one of the finest treatises ever written on liberty. He rightly said, you see the eloquence when he is saying that it is better to be, I quote J.S. Mill, he says, and this is one of the books that one must read, he said it is better to be a Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied. It is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied, unquote. So that is why J.S. Mill is a very important philosopher, and in the light of J.S. Mill's views on the concept of liberty, we will try to understand what liberty is. First of all, we should remember J.S. Mill is the chief supporter of negative concept of liberty. It means he believes that all kind of, whether social control or restrictions imposed by the state to the enjoyment of freedom or liberty is bad. He offers two kinds of definitions, two definitions of liberty. Number one, he says, liberty is being left to oneself. What is liberty? Liberty is being left to oneself, unquote. One line definition, but highly philosophical, and you will find the depth in it. He further says, and I quote, over himself, over his own body and mind, the individual is sovereign, unquote. So over himself, over his own body and mind, the individual is sovereign, unquote. So now what happens, that he said that liberty is being left to oneself. So what is liberty? That when a person is not harming others, because he is also talking about the self-regarding and other regarding actions. So he is saying that over his mind and body, an individual is sovereign. It means no external restraint should be there. Any external restrictions will be the violation or infringement upon the liberty of the individual. So that is why over himself, over his own body and mind, the individual is sovereign. Liberty is being left to oneself. It means that a state or the society is not going to disturb that person or regulating his or her behavior. It should not be there at all. Now you can say that if people are allowed to do whatever they want, then that will create anarchy. So, as a logical philosopher, what he tries to say, what he's trying to say, he says that there are two kind of actions of man. One is self-regarding action. The self-regarding action, the action that is related with, the individual only. The effect will be there on that individual only. So, for example, if a person is drinking, that is his own personal action. Either it is going to be useful or bad, it is for him only, and let him decide that whether he should go for drinking or not. Others should not say that you should not do this and that. But in the other regarding, so far as the self-regarding action is concerned, he said that the complete freedom should be given to the individual. But in the other regarding action, according to J.S. Mill, a state has a right to intervene or regulate the other regarding action of man. But that is also limited. In the other regarding action, the action of an individual which is going to affect other members of the society, then he says that the state can do only one thing, that a state can prevent that person from causing harm to others. This is the only thing that the state can do. If the person is trying to harm others, then only a state will intervene, otherwise the state will not intervene. So, in the light of the self-regarding and other regarding actions of man, we can find that he is trying to champion the cause of negative liberty, and he is saying that a state should not intervene in the personal affair of man, and unless person is going to harm others, a state should not do anything. The second definition that he offers is liberty is doing what one desires. Again, one line definition, but you see that this one liner is very important. So, liberty is doing what one desires. It means there should not be restriction on the desires of the individual. But again, here also you should see that the desire of the individual can be unlimited. We can ask an uncomfortable question. For example, if there is a person who says that my desire is to kill that particular person, some other individual, can we allow? Because that desire of the individual cannot be fulfilled in the society. It should not be allowed to be fulfilled. Can a person should be allowed to maintain or establish sexual relations with other sex without her or his consent? Because that is the desire of the individual? Not at all. That is. So, Mill is trying to explain this point here. He said liberty is doing what one desires, but at the same time, you see what you have to see. According to John, he himself is given example, John Stuart Mill. He said, suppose there is a bridge which is known to be unsafe. On both sides of the bridge, policemen are standing, representing a state. An individual tries to pass through that bridge and the policemen are not allowing him, saying you cannot go. The person can say that it is infringement upon my liberty because I wanted to cross the river and the policemen are not allowing. The policemen may say, for example, if the construction of road is there, the policemen, they divert the route. So you can say that this is infringement upon the freedom. So here, he's trying to explain this liberty is doing what one desires. He says that when the policeman or the policemen are trying to prevent a person from crossing through the bridge, they are justified in doing this because the bridge is old and unsafe. And if the person is passing through, he may fall into a river. under that kind of circumstances, what we have to understand that the policemen are trying to prevent the person from falling into river, not from crossing the river. The desire of the person was to cross the river, not to fall into river. So therefore, policemen are justified. So what happens that on the one hand he is giving liberty or freedom and talking about the negative concept of liberty, that all restrictions are bad, but on the other hand, what is happening, that he is creating a space for the interference of the state. It means that what is good and what is bad, a state is knowing what is good for that particular individual who was trying to cross the river. A state is knowing that it was unsafe, and that is why it was not good for the individual to pass through that bridge. And that creates a problem, and that is why J.S. Mill become what many scholars say prophet of empty liberty, giving full freedom to individual. Advocacy for full freedom of individual is there, but on the other hand, what happens that he is trying to take away those rights which he has offered them, liberty which he has offered them, and creating a space for the interference of the state. So, the problem of J.S. Mill is that why this contradiction you will find, why he becomes prophet of empty liberty at the end. Because the dichotomy of the negative concept of liberty and positive view of a state. For J.S. Mill, a state is a positive institution. A necessary evil, of course. On the other hand, what is there, that he is trying to advocate negative concept of liberty. So negative concept of liberty and positive view of a state is creating these logical contradictions, and that is why he has been called prophet of empty liberty. After this, we are going to discuss the dimensions of liberty. When, the dimensions of liberty, first of all, in the first liberty, the first dimension of liberty is natural liberty. Now, natural liberty, that has been emphasized by the social contractualists, Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. All these three social contractualists, you will find they were talking about certain kind of freedom. I just quoted, Rousseau's statement that man is born free, but everywhere is in chains. So, man is born free, that he is saying. So, freedom is natural. John Locke is saying that right to liberty is natural. Similarly, you will find Thomas Hobbes is saying that in the state of nature, all the people have equal natural rights, which included all kind of rights, all kind of freedom. So that is why, they advocate this natural liberty, that the liberty is natural and that must be given to the people. Unless the natural liberty or freedom is respected or promoted, given to the people, people will not be in a position to develop their personality and their potentials to the fullest extent. So that is why any restriction, unreasonable, of course, restriction will be bad. Then after that, we have individual liberty or personal liberty or private liberty or civil liberty, whatever you can call it. In our private or personal space, we enjoy the freedom of choice. That is liberty to marry according to one's own choice, or not to marry or not to marry at all. Somebody can say that I have renounced world, I don't want to marry, I don't want family. That is also his or her freedom. Again, one's choice of food, clothes, etc. That what should we eat? What should be the menu in my house? That should not be determined by others. Or what kind of clothes I should wear? That should be my personal choice. So this individual, personal or private liberty or civil liberty, as an individual, certain rights that we claim, certain liberty and freedom that we claim and are given by virtue of being the member of civil society, that is also called civil liberty. So that is why all individuals, they have got this kind of rights or freedom that we discussed just now. After that, social liberty. Liberty to share social spaces with other fellow beings. It may include freedom from slavery, freedom from untouchability, freedom from discrimination and humiliation, or freedom from social terrorism. So, what may happen that a dominant section of the society may try to impose certain ways of life upon others. If the dominant section of the society is trying, or the social structure is such where the marginalized people or the people at the lower stratum, they are not in a position to enjoy or share social spaces with others without any kind of fear. So it means that is again a restriction of social liberty. As untouchability, for example, that is violation of social liberty. Similarly, bonded labor, violation of social liberty. Discrimination or social terrorism, where the groups, not a state, they may be pressure group, a religious or cultural organization and group, they try to impose certain restrictions upon the individuals. That, for example, you cannot celebrate Valentine Day, if that is said by some others. That is also a kind of social terrorism. That who is going with whom, that should not be, that kind of surveillance should not be there by the private organizations or the associations or the groups. And Harold J. Lasky says that, this absence of special privileges is a necessary condition for the enjoyment of liberty. Social privileges, it means there are certain people who are more powerful, or those who are occupying a special position in the society, that they may be the people from the upper stratum of the society and the people from the lower stratum, and different kind of ethics are being imposed upon them. So that is violation of social liberty. Then we have political liberty. Liberty to choose one's representative, to contest elections, to follow the political ideology of one's choice, etc. The political liberty we can identify with democracy, especially, that we have to understand. According to Lasky, only a responsible government can ensure their realization of liberty. So it means that when we are discussing the dimensions of liberty, so liberty cannot be enjoyed in its real sense of the term without having a responsible government which is accountable to the people. An authoritarian government cannot ensure enjoyment of liberty. That will always put restrictions, most of the time unreasonable, on the enjoyment of freedom of liberty. So that is why, Harold J. Lasky says only a responsible government can ensure the realization of liberty. So here we find that it becomes political right, political freedom, political liberty. The way you have a right to criticize, or liberty or freedom to criticize your own government. You can disagree with the policies of the government and criticize. Interestingly, Lasky mentioned two necessary conditions for political liberty to be real. Number one, education, and number two, providing an honest and straightforward supply of news. He says a people without reliable news is sooner or later a people without the basis of freedom. Unquote. You see, this is very important. Today, what is happening in our times, that media, which was considered as fourth pillar of democracy, is proving to be a threat to democracy. I will say the corporate media, especially, where the media, the corporate houses are controlling media, and that media is trying to control the public opinion, manufacturing public opinion in such a way that the private loot and plunder, that can be justified. And that's why, under these kind of circumstances, what happens when the corporatization of media is there, it leads to you know, somebody rightly said that the the means of communication, which is media, the means of communication in the real sense of the term becomes what we call the means of mass deception. So, media rather, it should have been the fourth pillar of democracy, but today democracy itself is under threat from media because of manipulation, because of the corporatization and all. Economic liberty. Liberty to choose one's profession, occupation, trade, etc. That is economic liberty. So, when we say economic liberty, for example, what should be my profession? Earlier, you will find in our own society, the social structure was such that the work or the occupation was divided, and it was most of the time on the basis of birth. Upward mobility was not possible. So that is why the Shudras were assigned the task that was not considered as very good kind of job. So ultimately, those kind of jobs were assigned to them. So ultimately, you see, or what kind of role that was entrusted to women, all we have to see. So economic liberty means that freedom to choose one's occupation. How should I earn my livelihood? That I will decide. You cannot say that you can do this only or that. Ability and the qualifications are different things. This kind of, ability and qualification can be there for some kind of job, but ultimately, that freedom should be given to the people to have any kind of profession, occupation, or trade. And economic liberty is so important that Lenin says, and I quote, civil liberty is worthless without economic liberty. Unquote. Civil liberty is worthless without economic liberty. We can also understand this the significance of economic liberty for the enjoyment of personal or political or civil liberty on the ground that on the basis of the economic on the basis of the base and superstructure logic of Marx, that economy is the foundation or base and all other structures are the superstructures. So political, social, individual, other kind of liberty, they will be meaningless in the absence of economic liberty. In our times, however, it is often identified with the free market economy. So what has happened today? Economic liberty is considered as there should be freedom of goods and services. So that is why when we talk of economic liberty today, it means free market economy. It means liberalization. It means privatization and all. And that's why economic liberty in this context is contested. And there are people who say that globalization or liberalization and privatization, that is not economic liberty, but this is also leading to what is called marginalization of many people, and it is creating mass poverty. So this kind of debate is going on, but ultimately we can realize the significance of economic liberty for realization of other kinds of liberties. Conclusion. That is the last point, the last section of our discussion today. As we discussed, the different aspects of liberty, here we should remember that liberty and rights are closely linked and overlap. We found in our discussion that liberty and rights are closely linked and they overlap. For example, my freedom of expression, that is liberty, as well as it is right to freedom of expression. So that is why rights and liberties, they supplement and complement each other, and that is why they overlap and they are closely linked as well. According to Lasky, liberty can only be enjoyed in the presence of rights, he says. He warns that there cannot be liberty where the right of some depends upon the pleasures of others, unquote. So that is why the recognition of the right, liberty as rights, that is essential. The recognition may be by the state, can be by the state and protected by the law of the land. So that is why this is important. Again, we discussed that liberty has two aspects, positive and negative. The contradiction of the positive view of the state and the negative concept of liberty we already highlighted while discussing John Stuart Mill. Then the changing contours of liberty from the laissez-faire state to the welfare state, that we should see that the how the economic liberty is being emphasized, social liberty is being emphasized. Earlier, the state was considered as a necessary evil. Now it is becoming, necessary virtue. And again, what is happening that we are going to emphasize neoliberalism and economic liberty today. What is the implication? That neoliberalism is saying that state should go for cutbacks, the welfare measure that the state has adopted, for the benefit of the people, for the poor, that should be the job of the state. So ultimately, we are as if we are going back to the laissez-faire individualism. So with this, we come to conclude our discussion on liberty. Thank you very much. In the next class, we'll be dealing with the concept of equality and its dimensions. Thank you.